Hey guys, Leanna here, playing The Witcher 3. And I know I've spent a long time on this game, but it's really long. And the only time I really have for gaming now, because we're neck deep in E3 preparation, and I'm getting my cosplay show off the ground as well, is for these videos. So I'm sticking with this for the purpose of these videos to try to finish the game, because there is a lot to talk about in this game, and the shitstorm surrounding it has reached full-blown Punami proportions now, and part of that has to do with really rabid fanboys, part of it has to do with clan feminist frequency appearing on the scene, and, you know, things go from a small bonfire to, you know, a 4-alarm blaze whenever that name gets dropped. So I'm trying to stick it out and I'm trying to finish it because, you know, I think these things deserve to be talked about, but oh, you guys are already back. That's weird. I just got here. Sorry, I'm just gonna check the map. Today I'm gonna talk about, I'm saving the feminist depictions of women stuff. I've done a little bit of that, but those are just like single outfits. You know, this is way too complicated a game to do everything in a single video, and I wish more people understood that, but I'm working through it. But one thing I can address already is, you know, comments by Sir Jonathan of McIntosh. Oh, racing. I like racing. About, and let me read it. I gotta stop and read it now. Here we go. This is from May 30th. I've seen some mention the abundant sexism in The Witcher 3, but I've yet to see any real discussion of its toxic depiction of masculinity. Well, that's... I'll get to it. I'm just gonna read it. Read the whole thing. Resist, Leanna, resist. Okay, here we go. Geralt of Rivia is the perfect embodiment of hegemonic masculinity. Geralt from The Witcher 3 is emotionally deficient in the extreme. Never cries or laughs, never expresses grief, fear, sadness, or vulnerability. Our cultural notions of manhood are so warped that when tough, stoic male characters even have a pained look, we think it's super expressive. Most male game protagonists are depicted as emotionally stunted. This is presented as positive, even heroic, instead of as deeply unhealthy. When the only form of emotional expression available to male characters is looking pensive once in a while, we've got a masculinity problem. So that's his opinion. And I've played enough of this game at this point to be able to discuss that, because the issue with this, I'm going to try not to go too long on this, but there are about 3 different things that have absolutely nothing to do with masculinity, because it's a video game, and a fantasy video game at that, we can talk about Geralt's stoicism without even touching masculinity, and then there's stuff on top of that. So, first of all, right off the bat, let's just say it, The Witcher 3 is an RPG. It's an action RPG, which means, and this is no commentary on whether I think the game succeeds in this or not, it's just a fact of the genre. The character is supposed to be what you make them. So in an RPG, the character is supposed to be as snarky and sarcastic or as earnest and noble as you make them. You're supposed to be able to play the character as you want. Now, is it fair to say that that's hard to do with Geralt? Yes. Is it because of toxic masculinity? Well, not necessarily, and this is the second point that came to mind when I saw Jonathan McIntosh's comments. It's been an established point of lore in the Witcher series going all the way back that the mutation process that gives them the Witcher powers and the cat eyes and all that good stuff, robs them of their emotion. It strips them of being emotionally demonstrative. So Witchers are, by, definition, according to legend, stoic. Also, he's constantly dealing with weird stuff. And it's hard to get really excited when you're constantly dealing with stuff like this. And I mean, stoicism is not a new concept. Is it tied to masculinity? Yeah. Is it tied to masculinity in this game? To an extent, yes. But something we have to remember about The Witcher, going back to the books, is that it was written as a sort of social allegory for Poland, pre-1990s. It's important to remember that when this book came out, Poland had just gotten independence from the Soviet Union. It was only a few years after they actually had democratic elections again that, this is taking a really long time, cutscene. But that's important to remember when you factor in various depictions of things. Now, does that excuse it for being artistically lazy? No, it doesn't if it does that. However, on top of that, there's a issue with the fact that Jonathan McIntosh specifically says that Geralt does not show fear. There's an entire side quest devoted to a bunch of warriors and Geralt going into a cave and facing their greatest fears. And we actually, who is singing? We actually get to see the, stop it, weirdo singer. That's freaking me out. So, we actually get to see Geralt go into a cave and face his greatest fear. And that greatest fear is, hide your ears if you don't want the spoiler. Well, it's connected to the Wild Hunt. I won't say exactly what it is. But we actually get to see what Geralt of Rivia is afraid of. And you don't see that in all video games. But he also, in his moments with Triss Merigold, he smiles a lot more. He, he loosens up, he relaxes, he becomes a lot more of a human being. He smiles a lot more around Triss. And so, I guess what I'd say, oh, hello, is Jonathan McIntosh wrong when he says that there is an element of toxic masculinity in these games? No, he's not wrong. It's used as an artistic device. Is the game saying that toxic masculinity is an ideal state of being? I'd argue with that simply because, wow, those are big footprints. I'd argue with that simply because we have a character in Geralt who's stuck. He's like soul-bound to this woman who he's kind of conflicted about. Everybody talks about the fact that he's essentially controlled by her. And so I'm not prepared to accept that this is freaking me out, and this is probably going to be a lower point, so I'm going to wrap up before we get there. I'm not prepared to accept that just because a game uses toxic elements of conventional masculinity as a story or character point, that they are necessarily saying that that form of masculinity is a good thing. I think that this game especially deals with that in a very nuanced point of view, and I think it's up to the player to decide, except in a few cases where the game moralizes, and it drives me crazy because those are the exceptions as opposed to the rule. But I think that if you play the game and you work on it based on it being a video game and remembering that you stay in control of what you think and what you choose to feel about the various encounters that Geralt has, I think that if you actually play it like a game instead of an interactive movie, this game satirizes and even criticizes the very toxic masculinity that Jonathan McIntosh is claiming it promotes. And maybe promotes is the wrong word. What did he actually say? I'm going to go back. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I disagree with the statement that game protagonist depicted as emotionally stunted in the case of Geralt is presented as a positive, even heroic, instead of deeply unhealthy. I think we're supposed to believe that in Geralt's case it is unhealthy. That's the take I'm taking from this. And I wouldn't say that about previous Witcher games. That is a big step forward as far as I'm concerned for The Witcher 3. I think more than anything, in the love triangle with Triss and Yennefer, I think that the game is making a strong but subtle statement about how toxic masculinity, for lack of a better term, leads Geralt astray in terms of his personal choices. And I think that's a big step forward in terms of how the Witcher video games adapt the books, because that was the element of the books I never saw in the games. And I realized it's because Yennefer wasn't in the games before now. So that's a really short version. I could go on and on and on and on about this, but I just wanted to point this out for people who don't want to spend 60 some odd hours playing this game and are wondering if there's a counterpoint to this issue of depiction of masculinity in the game. So I hope that's helpful. I hope people take it for what it is. And I hope I stop being sick, because I'm really, really sick of doing these videos while choking on snot.